Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Colton Ogburn, and Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is finally here. And hey, it only took 30 years.
That was fast.
We're going to review the film and tell you guys everything we loved and maybe didn't love, discuss comparisons to the original, and theorize on the possibility of a third installment. And a little later, I'm going to be joined by my friends Whitney Van Laningham and our own Brianna McLarty to get their thoughts on the film. But first, let me share mine.
My turn.
I'm a pretty big fan of the original Beetlejuice. I watched it a lot on VHS as a kid. I'm a huge Michael Keaton fan. I love Catherine O'Hara, and I'm also a big fan of Tim Burton's recent series Wednesday starring Jenna Ortega, so safe to say I was pretty damn excited for this sequel. Now, let me be clear, I did have a good time at this movie, but I do, however, have some complaints. But first, let me share some love. This movie feels like Beetlejuice, and that's thanks to the fact that they got Tim Burton back to direct. The wacky and quirky nature of this film and its determination to not take itself too seriously was a great way to honor the original film. I also really like that Winona Ryder's character, Lydia Dietz, was the star of the film. I assumed that Jenna Ortega and Beetlejuice would take center stage, but Lydia really is the main character of this movie, and I think that was the right choice. Winona Ryder, of course, doesn't miss a beat, and it was so great and, of course, nostalgic seeing her back in the role of Lydia. The same, of course, goes for Catherine O'Hara as Delia, and Michael Keaton's portrayal of Beetlejuice is, in my opinion, better than ever.
The juice is loose.
And I am so glad that Michael Keaton didn't get burned on this one like he did with his return to Batman. He, of course, returned to play Batman in the Batgirl movie that got canned and the Flash movie that got panned. I liked it. So I'm glad that this iconic return to a role from his past is shaping up to be beloved. Now, having said all that, I do have some complaints, and I know it feels a little silly to get into critiques of a movie as wacky as Beetlejuice, but bear with me. The movie has a serious villain problem. In the original film, Beetlejuice was the villain, and I was all for this sequel having him be more of an anti-hero and helping Lydia with another ghostly threat. But the villains just fell flat for me. The whole Beetlejuice had a wife who wants revenge is cool, but they executed it horribly. It's like this concept of her hunting down Beetlejuice was going to be the through line of the movie, but then that plot just kind of takes a back seat for most of the film. She barely speaks the entire movie, and her hunting of Beetlejuice really has nothing to do with the other stuff going on in the story. And then she just shows up at the end to be quickly defeated. Same goes for the murder boy ghost. He shows up, we get this twist that he's a bad ghosty, yada yada yada, Lydia pulls Astrid off a train, and then Beetlejuice sends him to hell, which I'll admit was an awesome scene, but felt super rushed and just, I don't know, anticlimactic?
That's it?
And then there's Lydia's boyfriend, who I was totally convinced would also be revealed to be like a soul sucker like Beetlejuice's wife, but nope, just another villain with another completely unrelated motive. So my point is that we have these three completely unrelated villains whose motives could have been great if given a little more time to be fleshed out. I personally would have preferred a single focus on one villain, or at least have the villains like working together or something.
I think a bunch of guys like us should team up.
Overall, the story just felt really discombobulated, and there were too many different things going on, at least for me. And I have to say, it kind of bothered me that Beetlejuice was betrayed at the end. Don't get me wrong, I know he's a creep, but hey, he did help Lydia get her daughter back and save her from being banished to the great beyond. But at the end, Lydia doesn't hold up her end of the deal, which, don't get me wrong, that's fine, because I'm not in favor of a forced marriage, especially since he's been creeping on her since she was a literal child. But I gotta say, I did think it was kind of dumb how we see Beetlejuice get like this big villain defeat at the end of the movie, like he was the big bad of the movie when he wasn't. Well guys, those are just my thoughts. Now I want to bring on two friends of the show. We've got Whitney Van Laningham of Guardians of the Galaxy fame and our own Brianna McLarty. I am so excited to talk to both of you about this movie. I just shared some critiques I had of the film, but overall I really did enjoy it. I had a good time. So Whitney, I know you're a huge Beetlejuice fan. What were your thoughts on the movie overall? Is it a worthy sequel?
I'm the ghost with the most, babe. So you know I got opinions. Oh my gosh. I definitely thought that it was a worthy sequel. The Galaxy episode about my thoughts on the original OG Beetlejuice will come out later this week. But in that, I mentioned that the only thing that I wanted for this movie, like the only thing where I was just like, this has to happen or it will suck, is that I did not want it to rest too much on the first Beetlejuice. I hate it when sequels do that. I hate it when they just do only callback lines. They don't write any new jokes. It's just all, callbacks and stuff like that. This was a completely fresh take on the BJU, as I like to call it. The Beetlejuice universe got expanded. We got so much more lore about the department of the recently deceased. We met a lot of very funky characters. I was truly obsessed with the fact that there was an entire character whose whole job was handing Willem Dafoe cups of hot coffee that he could spill in anger. I thought that was just like the greatest bit ever. Did that character need to exist? No. If they cut Willem Dafoe out of the movie, it would have been exactly the same movie. That character was completely unnecessary, and I loved him. I don't give a shit. Pour more Willem Dafoe into my veins. So I really enjoyed this movie. How about you guys?
Well, Whitney, I have to say, I loved your little slip up there, the OG slip
Yeah,
up.
I did. Whoops.
The juice is loose. Brianna, I've been wanting to ask what your thoughts on this were, but I've been holding back for the talk back. So I'm anxious to hear. What did you think?
I really liked it. I think it was a worthy sequel. I think it had some pacing issues. I feel like recently movies have even doing this thing where they're super long or they like really condense their material. I wish this had been like 15 minutes longer because there was so many cool characters. I loved William Dafoe's character. I even loved the wife, but I wish we had gotten to spend a little more time with them so they felt more integral and important to the world, especially with the wife. That was mainly my critique with her.
We need more Dolores immediately. That is what I'm sure that they're making a third one though, and I really think that the third one's gonna be all Dolores all day, baby.
Don't say the title.
I hope so, because she was cool.
I won't say the title or he'll show up to this podcast and then we'll all die.
But no, I really liked it. I love that it kept the feel of the old movie. I was really worried that was going to be lost because, like, to me, I was like, is that just because it's like an 80s movie? Is that like part of the feel? But like, no, it totally kept it. I loved the return to form for Tim Burton. And I loved how creepy it was. Like, this is such a small detail, but one of my favorite details was the cat lady whose cat was eating her.
Yes,
like,
it was so
that
good.
was sick.
Dude,
I was like, yes.
I laughed so hard at that and at the burnt Santa Claus because I was just like, oh, the implications of this waiting room right now are that these people had a bad night.
I enjoyed it, but my number one complaint with it, and you kind of touched on this a little, Brianna, it had a serious villain problem. We get introduced to this wife character, which seems really cool. I thought her introduction was awesome coming out of the box. Yeah, but then, I don't know, just the whole movie, they cut to her like every 30 minutes or 20 minutes, like soul-sucking somebody, and then she has like hardly any dialogue, and the story didn't really tie in at all. I thought that the concept of the boy that Jenna Ortega's character was with, finding out he's a ghost and all that was a really cool concept that I thought they didn't really give a lot of time to. I thought like they introduced that little arc and then it was done, like Beetlejuice sends him to hell, which was awesome. I thought that was really cool.
The singular use of the word in that moment was chef's kiss perfect.
It was so good.
Died laughing.
My wife actually leaned over to me because he F-bombs later in the movie and they bleeps
it.
Yeah. And they were like, oh, they bleep that one? I'm like, well, actually, it's PG-13 and they only get one F.
I also agree that they just there were so many storylines and each of them were so interesting. And I also really, really wanted to stick with them more. Unfortunately, Dolores does not pass the Bechdel test. She spends the whole time only talking about getting her husband back to suck out his sweet, sweet, dirty, nasty, disgusting, grotesque soul. So I agree with that. I loved the ghost twist. I definitely saw it coming a mile away, but I also am a person who for a living analyzes every single frame of a movie compulsively and uncontrollably. So I was like, oh, he's ghost, like the second that I saw him.
Yeah.
But I think that if you are like, and this is not an insult, by the way, to any of our viewers out there, if you are a viewer who is not obsessively checking every frame of a movie, you will be surprised by this twist. And that's what I really liked. I really liked that, like, if my mom watched this movie, my mom would have never guessed that he was a ghost, I
didn't get that he was a ghost at first, but I knew something was off when they introduced the parents and didn't show their faces. I was like, something's going on here. Like, and when Astrid first meets him and he goes into their house and all that,
there were some great details with him too. Like one that actually tipped me off was obviously the parents, but then when they go into his room, it's all 90s stuff.
It's completely
like,
90s.
Yeah, exactly.
He has a fucking Daniel Johnston "Hi, how are you" poster that I have in my living room, and I was so excited. I was like, Ghost Boy and I have the same exact Daniel Johnston poster. The devil in Daniel Johnston, and now the devil is in whatever the that guy's doing in hell now. So I loved that. I thought that was really cool, especially because, yeah, the name of the album is The Devil and Daniel Johnson, and then he goes to hell at the end. That was a sick 90s grunge band reference, and I am here for it.
And Brianna, am I being too analytical? Like, part of me thinks there were a lot of really cool elements here that just didn't get enough attention. They should have focused on one. I talked about that a little earlier. And personally, for me, if I were making this movie, I would have had it to where the whole Beetlejuice wife thing, I would have scrapped that. I would have focused on the Ghost Boy element, introduced that earlier. And I wouldn't have had Beetlejuice come in until Lydia realizes that she needs the help of Beetlejuice and summons him. Mm-hmm. I think that should have been the first time we saw him on camera. Move it up a little earlier, like at the very end of the first act or something like that. Mm-hmm. But am I being too picky here? Should I be more giving, for a Beetlejuice movie, a Tim Burton movie?
I mean, I think it's a very wacky movie, and I will say one thing I actually did love about all the plot lines was how they kind of were jumping around and like coalescing at the very end. I actually thought that was really fun with some of the like, as much as I wish we gotten a little bit more, I love that it was so quick at the end in terms of like all of the plot lines just like kind of crashing into each other, literally. I actually love seeing Beetlejuice early, and I like that he was still pining after Lydia. But part of this is something you said earlier in your script, where he is still the villain. And in my opinion, he was always the villain. I liked that he like at the end was like treated like a villain, and part of it is because he's still pining after a 14-year-old girl, and that's creepy.
Gross.
So I liked seeing that he was
her high school photo on his desk. It is weird. It is weird. And speaking of that, addressing the elephant in the room just really quick, I was very uncomfortable with the fact that they kept showing disgraced pedophile Jeffrey Jones's face every 5 minutes. I was like, whoa there. I really enjoyed that they bit his head off with the shark, but I thought that the actual gravesite portrait of him was a little much, and they showed it repeatedly, and I was like, please don't give that any more screen time. I already feel gross rewatching the first Beetlejuice, but I did love that they had him die such a brutal, vicious death. I thought that was very funny. And when they just did it in claymation, if that was all that they did with like Jeffrey Jones's character in terms of like showing him, I would have been fine with that. I loved that they had him die an awful, grisly death in claymation. Thought that was great. I could have done without the gravesite portrait. I thought that was a little weird.
I agree, and I feel like there was a really easy fix for that with Catherine O'Hara character being an artist. I was like, oh, well, why didn't they just make like a painting or like a
wacky sculpture that doesn't really look like him, but like an abstract thing that was made by, Delia? I thought, that would have been so much better in my opinion.
Yeah, but speaking of Catherine O'Hara, she killed it. She was so funny.
Absolutely.
Slayed.
I love you.
One of my favorite parts was when she's just like, normally I think it's a little bit funny when you torture your mom because of what she put me through, but not today.
As a huge Schitt's Creek fan.
I was like, I'm dying. That would be so embarrassing. Also, I felt so bad for her because I was like, I would actually have to leave that.
That's way more embarrassing than your mom being on Ghost House, which is the dumbest name for a fucking show. That also made me laugh so hard. Just the fact that it's called Ghost House.
And she has the same haircut she had at 14.
Whitney, speaking of creepy men, I agree that yes, when I saw the teenage picture of her on his desk, I was like, that's weird. But at the same time, Beetlejuice was, yes, he was the villain in the first movie. He wasn't the villain in this one, I didn't think. He saved Astrid from being sent to the afterlife. So, he drops that guy into hell. I thought that was all pretty cool. And while I'm not supporting like a forced marriage here, but I thought it was a little weird that they like gave him the big like villain ending when really he was a hero, I think, in this movie. Am I wrong? Either of you take that. Tell me where I'm wrong.
I definitely think he wasn't the villain in this movie in terms of like, yes, he was not the one who was trying to get Astrid to hell. I still think he was a villainous, lecherous guy. And I think he actually kind of in a weird way paralleled Lydia's like almost husband. Like he was willing to kind of like help her, but it was like for leechy, gross reasons. And then at the end, he can't even just marry her like a normal person. He's like, no, I'm going to possess every single human here and make you do your stupid little dance. Like she's trying to speak over him and he mutes her. Like he mutes her like they're in a Zoom call. So he's still gross. And I think that it was, and she also has like obviously like kind of PTSD, like they touch on that. So I was fine with that because I was like, yeah, like he did save Astrid, but really, in my opinion, Lydia saved Astrid by using Beetlejuice as her own tool after he tried to use her so many times.
Okay, I'm swayed. That's a fair point.
I agree with that. I very heavily with that interpretation of it because that's also how I saw it. I thought that he was still the villain because he was still like, I mean, yeah, all of his motives were completely ulterior. Like he just wanted to remarry his high school sweetheart. And when I say that, I mean she was in high school, not him. Gross. However, allow me to play BJ's advocate for 1 second. I do not condone this. However, probably to him, he's like 600 years old, so age is just a number, and he knows that Lydia's coming to the afterlife at some point anyway, and then he's gonna make his move. Grossed me out, though. Grossed me out, but I understand suspending disbelief for movie purposes. I get that.
Yeah. Agreed.
Not great, though.
Okay. Yeah. So... sequel. I'm not going to say the title of the sequel. Are we going to get one? Do you want one? Should this be a one and done type thing? I think it's important that if they do a sequel, it be directed by Tim Burton. I'm not sure that I'm interested in a sequel for sequel's sake.
Yeah.
Brianna, do you want a third Beetlejuice?
I would actually love a third Beetlejuice that was more focused on Astrid. I really like that Lydia seemed to get like the actual kind of closure she needed with Beetlejuice in this sequel, but I did feel like Astrid wasn't characterized as heavily as she could have been. I think a lot of her character was just in opposition to her mom, and to be fair, teens do that. I probably did that too, but I did feel like her character could have been a little bit like more rounded out, especially she had a lot of like punk influences in her dressing style, and I wish they had like kind of full sent with that more. But if they did sort of like the dream sequence montage thing, I would like love to see that more explored and have like Astrid like 10 years in the future and she's like just had a baby and something like that. I think that would be like a cool way to like sort of bring this up, or her dad starts appearing to her. There's like a lot of things they could do that I think would be cool with her character. I
really appreciated the fact that Lydia was the star of this movie. I thought that Astrid, I thought, with Jenna Ortega being a hot name right now, I thought she would be the lead of this movie. I was glad that she was more of a secondary character. And for a third film, I think Jenna Ortega could take the spotlight. I mean, she fits in this universe perfectly. Whitney, do you want a third Beetlejuice?
I want all the Beetlejuice in my life. I definitely want a third one. I think that ending gave us a lot to explore. I do think that it was very interesting that like during the whole like the wedding scene, at one point Beetlejuice says, "I love a dream sequence," and I was like, "But wait, this isn't a dream. This is actually happening. What do you mean by that?" And then he like inceptions her with a dream sequence at the end, and I was like, "Oh, Beetlejuice, you sneaky little bitch. I love you, dude." So I think that there is going to be something where he's going to be pissed that she found a loophole to send him back, and he might be haunting her. He might be haunting Astrid. He might be coming back. He might have, because he did impregnate Winona with the creepy baby. So I don't know. Does that have lasting effects? Like, you know how like when like a normal non-Beetlejuice woman gets pregnant, the baby's cells like become a part of her, and she takes on the baby's cells, and the baby cells take on her cells. Did that happen? Did real science happen in the underworld? Help! Because that would be a whole other ball game. What if she really is related to? Oh my god, it was so horrifying. I would kill myself.
I was like, Alien has nothing on this. Like,
Alien has nothing on this.
I'm glad you bring up that scene because I also was like, ooh, like, am I taking this too seriously right now? And then I was like, okay, calm down. It's probably just like an illusion. But yeah, actually, you make some good points of
casting an illusion where you impregnate a woman against her will is kind of messed up. Kind of messed up, y'all.
Pretty messed up.
And she has like the eraser head baby. I couldn't.
I know. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
I will say that I did like that this movie didn't dial it back at all. Like,
no.
They didn't try to adjust it for our current times at all. They were like, we're going freaking weird with it. And I did appreciate that.
Beetlejuice is still going to be problematic as hell. Let's go.
Yeah.
Like it was great. I did like that they kept him sleazy, kept him easy, they kept him breezy. And I really liked that.
And they kept it gross. I feel like one thing I've seen or felt a lot with, like, as someone who really likes Tim Burton, a lot of his Disney films have really gotten sanitized, and like you can tell that like Disney was like, let's draw back. Especially in the Alice in Wonderland sequel, I was like, okay, she climbs heads in the first one, what is this? But I feel like they did just let Tim Burton be like, just go, just do whatever you want, whatever weird little thing comes up in your mind, whatever weird gross thing happens, we're fine with it. It can happen.
They gave him a bag of cocaine like it was the 80s, and they told him to go nuts. They said, Burton, do your worst. Let's get him again. But that is why I really enjoyed it, because I do feel like they actually expanded on the world without relying too much on the first one. They still made us feel like we were in the world of the first one without making that the central focus of the movie, of being like, ha, hey, remember this line? Remember the ghost with the most line, everybody? Ha, he said it again. I hate shit like that. I love that all of the jokes were new and fresh. I love that they didn't do another shake, shake, shake Sonora scene. The banana song during the funeral was great. I loved that as like a little homage, but I'm so glad that they didn't just like repeat the same exact beats over and over again.
Yeah, I agree, because we are in a situation in the film industry where sequels and reboots and that seems to be all the craze right now. So I did appreciate that Burton brought some originality to it. I appreciated that the studio let him bring some originality to it. Didn't say, hey, carbon copy the first one. That's what we want. I was glad that he kind of did his own thing while simultaneously, threw in a few member berries, which I appreciated. All right. Well, I want to thank both of you so much for joining me. Whitney Van Lanningham, you can check her out on her socials. We'll have those linked below, as well as Guardians of the Galaxy, terrific podcast that she does with friends of the channel, MT and Tommy Bechtels. And of course, we have Brianna McLarty, our very own Brianna McLarty. She writes, she edits, does lots of great stuff here at ScreenCrush, so be sure to check her out. Now, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe, smash that bell for alerts, and let us know your thoughts down in the comments below regarding Beetlejuice. For ScreenCrush, I'm Colton Ogburn.